Yeah, you can first I'll throw to you and kick things off, and then I will man the waiting room and let people in as they come in.
Sounds good. Well, welcome everyone. I'm glad you all can make it. Today, our guest speaker is Sam Bai. Sam has spent the last 5 years running revenue operations for startup companies and preparing them for scale. He's going to be teaching us about rev operations. And with that, Sam, why don't you go ahead and take it over?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Christian. If anyone can't hear me for whatever reason, just give me a signal of some kind. But I think I have Eric and Christian monitoring that. And I'm also going to bring my screen up and probably just ask for a thumbs up there. How we looking, Eric and Christian? Good? Excellent.
You're good.
So yeah, here to talk about RevOps today, or revenue operations. Thanks a lot, Christian, for the intro. I'm going to expand a little bit on what you said. So talk about who am I and why am I talking about RevOps today? So I started my career out of college, and I'll make this quick. I started my career out of college at a small manufacturing company doing technical sales. When I say small, it was an office staff of about 15 and then a warehouse crew of about 60 to 70. So it was a bit like the show The Office, where you had the office team up top and then the warehouse workers down below. And it was a very agile kind of work environment. You know, we had direct interaction with the manufacturing team and all the shipping and logistics and everything like that. And being a sales guy, I really appreciated the value of having that open and constant communication with the other team. While I was at that job in the evenings, I went to graduate school here in Pennsylvania, and which led to my first, I would say, big time marketing job at a big Fortune 500 company. It's called Agilent. They are a biotech company, about 13,000 employees. So that was quite a big transition to me to go from not only just sales to my role, which was product marketing, but also from a team of almost 13 to 13,000. So learned a lot of stuff in that role. Basically, product marketing, how Agilent was structured was that they had a bunch of different product lines and a bunch of different service product lines, and they would assign a product manager to each one to sort of oversee the business from the time of customer awareness all the way down to when the customer receives and begins consuming the product or service, whatever it might be. In my case, it was repair services for lab equipment. So I really got to see sort of the full life cycle, or what we'll get into, the full revenue operations cycle of how things worked at a big Fortune 500 company. Now, this company had been around a while. It was a spinoff of HP. There was a lot of old and bad habits, old way of doing things, a lot of old sales veterans that were sort of stuck in their way of doing things. So I spent what felt like a very long 5 years trying to navigate what I'd call the most convoluted, counterintuitive, most disorganized sales and marketing operations that I've ever had to experience. And so it wasn't too long before I became overwhelmed and wanted to return to sort of that small, streamlined, agile, kind of scrappy, small business work environment. So I found myself settling into agency life here in Philadelphia, where I started as a sales and marketing strategist for a small digital agency. This was a digital agency that they had enterprise clients. They were primarily getting a lot of new customers through word of mouth and referrals and just the CEO going out and networking and things like that. And they'd never done any form of outbound marketing. They didn't have a sales playbook or anything like that. So it was my job to sort of build that from scratch. And once I had done that and I'd gotten that sales and marketing workflow kind of streamlined and sort of automating certain parts of it and making the job sort of easier for myself and those that would come after me, I sort of had a hunger to return to something a bit more exciting, maybe something a bit more involved with sales. So I moved on to another agency, this time a branding agency, where I again started off in sales. This branding agency is where I met Eric, and where I was promoted to my first title as revenue operations lead, even though I did have experience in revenue operations at Agilent. And then things got let's say things got a little exciting at that company and there were some unfortunate downsizing, but the good news is that Eric is now doing Thrive full-time as a result. And also as a result, I got back to my roots, settling into another digital agency doing marketing now. I'd be remiss if I didn't say the name of the agency, because they did give me a couple hours off to do this presentation today. So they are apostrophecms.com. They are a customizable website builder and content management system. They also do a bit of hosting and some customized software solutions. So yeah, a quick plug for my employer for giving me the time off to do this. But what kind of led me here today was all of that professional experience, and then of course my personal experience in my free time when I'm not doing working. I love to draw, I love to read, and I'm really into traveling. So if any of those hobbies or interests jive with you, or if you have any questions about RevOps or anything small business related, I would invite you to please connect with me on LinkedIn. I check my messages there, I'd say 2 to 3 times a day. And when I'm on LinkedIn, I'm sort of in that business mindset. So, and I also wanted to include my profile picture there, so you see what I look like when I'm clean shaven, and you know that you've found the right guy on LinkedIn when you see that profile picture. So what are we going to talk about today? If you're on full screen, I promise this is the only bright red slide that I'm going to flash in your face. So before everyone gets cataracts, I'll move through this list really quick. We covered who I am, and I would also like to talk today about, just at a high level, what is RevOps, why you should care about RevOps, how to build a RevOps strategy, where to start with RevOps at your own business, my favorite RevOps tools to get started, and a discussion about, you guessed it, RevOps. So you're going to be pretty sick of that term by the end of this presentation, but I'll try and use it sparingly as I can. So a couple things before we dive in to keep in mind as I sort of move through the presentation here. First of all, one that doesn't appear here. If you have any questions or comments or want to interject, please feel free to stop me or raise your hand or whatever. And if I miss it, Eric and Christian can keep an eye out. But aside from that, for the sake of today's discussion, I'll be referring to RevOps as a function of your business as opposed to a specific person. So what I kind of mean by that is that if you're bootstrapping a business right now and you're kind of doing it solo, then RevOps is going to be your responsibility as the person running the business. So if I mention like a salesperson or a customer service representative, but you're a one-person show at the moment, that just means I'm talking about you. So try and think about the activities that I bring up today as more of like an allocation of your time as opposed to a hire you need to make or a delegation you need to make of some kind. Just keep that in mind. So if I say the salesperson should be doing this and you are the one selling your product, then I'm talking about you. And then the second point to keep in mind, and this is more for after this presentation, when you start your own revenue operations journey, is that like all functions, revenue operations is going to differ a lot from company to company, particularly as RevOps is a relatively new term. It's sort of a transformation in organizational structure that's taken place, I'd say, within the past few decades without doing a ton of research. So what I've tried to do is frame things in a way that are most applicable to bootstrappers. So if you see any variations when you do your own research, just keep that in mind. And I'll try to point out some of those variations as we move through the definitions and some of the examples I have here. Great. So with that out the way, let's dive in just to a high-level definition of revenue operations to get us started. I picked this definitions because it's nice, short, and concise, and jived with my view of what revenue operations is. Really quick, I got this from a website for the company Revenue Grid. They are a revenue intelligence platform, so they use different tools and software to extract data from your revenue stream, analyze that data for you, and then feed it back to you and visualize it in a way that enables you to make data-driven decisions. which is going to be one of the things at the core of revenue operations once we dive in. So I'll go ahead and read what we have here. Revenue operations, or RevOps, refer to bringing sales, marketing, and customer service together to drive revenue growth for a business. It ensures all of these teams work towards the same goals and gives managerial stakeholders a complete view of the revenue streams. So, like I said, this is more of a concise definition, but the three things I kind of want to keep in everyone's mind here are the sales, marketing, and customer service aspects of your business. Revenue operations is all about bringing those into one kind of cohesive organization. A couple of the variations I mentioned earlier, you will occasionally see the definition of RevOps include finance, but depending on the size of your business, that can muddy the waters a bit. Finance in some companies has the power to do things like hiring freezes or different types of spend that are not really related to RevOps. So that kind of muddies the water a bit. So just be prepared if you do see that outside of this presentation. But for the sake of today, we're going to stick to just those three functions. And also, some of the resources that I go through and some of the ones that you'll find, they refer to, they'll sometimes just say sales, marketing, and service. And depending on what your business is, whether you're selling a product or a service, that's important to keep in mind, because if you're selling more of a tangible product, customer service might play less of a role in the delivery of that product and act more as sort of a support function. Whereas, if you are a service business, customer service may include the actual product as well. So that's just something to keep in mind as I move through the presentation here. So we know what the definition of revenue operations is. Let's bring in a couple visual aids to kind of help us understand it. So this is sort of what I'll call the traditional model of a sales, marketing, and customer service organization. It's one that resembles what I learned when I was in business school. And it's sort of that typical model of, and these red lines here are supposed to represent sort of lines of communication or touch points between the different organizations and the different stakeholders here. So what you have here is you have marketing. I wonder if I can drag my cursor over here to do this. Can you see my cursor if I drag it over the thing, just so I can kind of point to what I'm talking about here. So what you have here is, right, you have marketing putting out all their marketing collateral, whether that's ads or posts on social media. They're pushing that out to their audience, and then you hope that it catches the attention of a few interested parties, which you can talk about or you can refer to as prospects or leads, interested parties, whatever you want to call them. The goal of which is that marketing will tell them, here's who you need to call in order to make a purchase, place a sale, find out more. And so you hope that those prospects will call sales. Sales will convert the prospects into customers. And then the customers, when they need support, they will call your customer service department. So there's a few reasons why, and then at the end of the day, you hope that the customer has actually had a good experience throughout all this. So there's a few reasons why this model is becoming a bit outdated, and models that resemble this are becoming a bit outdated. And the first one, and probably most important, is because when you separate marketing, sales, and customer service, they're each going to have their own set of goals and objectives, right? The marketing management might say, our job is to produce leads, it's to set up sales for success. We need to go out there and pull in as many leads as possible. And they might see that as a success. Whereas sales, they're a bit more focused on converting those leads, maybe bringing in a few leads of their own and doing things like upselling. And then customer service, their goals might be a bit more qualitative, like how many stars out of 5 was the rating of the service we provided today, or something like that. So with all of them not working towards the same goal, there's really not a lot of motivation for them to communicate with one another. Why would sales talk to marketing about what sales incentives they're using? They're just worried about getting more leads from marketing. So things like that. You hope that this communication takes place. But without this organization being centralized, that's not always the case. So some other faltering points about this model is that you might create a bit of conflict and even competition sometimes between the departments. I've seen this particularly when I worked at corporate between the sales and marketing departments. This happens way too often because both are in some respects responsible for leads and both are responsible for revenue. So they might be competing just on that front, but also, marketing could be feeding a ton of leads to sales, but they're low quality leads. So then you have sales complaining to marketing saying you're doing everything wrong. These leads aren't convertible. I can't even keep up with all these leads. Some are slipping through the cracks and I can't even call them. And then marketing similarly might talk to sales and say, we're sending you all these great leads. Why can't you convert more of them? You're actually the reason we're not producing as much revenue. So it becomes sort of combative and you almost find them butting heads once in a while. And then sure enough, customer service has to, when the customer calls, has to explain why this is all going on and trying to keep the customer from churning and from going to one of your competitors or something like that. So there's a lot left to be desired here with this model. And what a lot of companies are doing now as they evolve are moving to a model that looks a bit more like this. So what do organizations look like after implementing RevOps? This is not the best diagram. I spent a bit of time last night trying a few different variations, but basically what this is supposed to show is prospects and customers communicating with the RevOps organization, not just sales, not just marketing. I know that arrow is pointing to marketing, and not just customer service, but centrally to the entire organization when they speak. In other words, when a prospect or customer shows interest or they plant a touch point in the sales or in the revenue operations life cycle, that all of these departments are kept abreast of that. So why is this better? First of all, they're all using the same tools, resources, and tech stack and things like that. If you're the revenue operations, you're not just going to download Hootsuite and then not give sales and customer service access to that because it's just a marketing tool. And then same goes for sales and customer service. If you want to promote that communication and that if you want to enable that communication between different departments, getting them all on the same tech stack, getting them all using the same processes is really what's going to facilitate that communication and that collaboration between departments. Another thing, by uniting the teams, and maybe I should have started with this one, about uniting these teams under the organization of revenue operations, is that the goal of revenue operations is just that, to produce more revenue. So instead of saying marketing is responsible for setting up sales to convert leads into sales that result in revenue, and then customer service is responsible for making sure they're not falling off. You look at the entire organization. How can each of these three parts as a whole produce more revenue? So if sales are faltering, it's not just we need to beef up sales, it's let's pull together the revenue operations department and try and solve this problem that's happening over in sales. Just like in marketing, the people who post the content and the people who post the or people who do the data analytics, they're not competing with one another. They're not doing that in a silo. One function is enabling another function to do their job better. So think of them more as functions instead of separate departments when you look at this. And then checking my notes here, that the final thing, of course, is that you create a better experience for the customer because they're being given a consistent message no matter who they speak to, because they're all on the same page, because they're all part of the same organization. So it's a different way of sort of dispersing the tasks throughout the organization and a different way of encouraging and enabling these teams to work together a bit more cohesively. So that all sounds Great, all of that theory. Let's talk about a real-world example of RevOps in action, or perhaps lack thereof. Now, I had to make up the story because I couldn't find a case study that perfectly exemplified the point I wanted to make here. So this is a very basic, uncreative example, but I'm going to read it off anyway. So, internet company's marketing department runs a promotion for a mid-level internet plan, but the sales department incentivizes sales representatives relative to the size of the internet plan they sell, causing them to push the more expensive plan onto customers who originally called because they saw that marketing ad, right? So this situation at first glance might not seem that bad, right? The sales department sold the more expensive plan, the customer closed on the sale, and the company made a lot of revenue. But if we go back to, the pillars of RevOps and how RevOps is supposed to operate, we actually see a few cracks in what happened here. So the first one, right, is that marketing, who just ran that promotion for that mid-level internet plan, they're going to get a lot of bad data back, and they might get data back that they don't even know what to do with. So they've run this promotion, and the result was that customers bought the more expensive product. So marketing might be scratching their heads right now going, what happened? Was that even a success? I mean, we made a lot of revenue, but that didn't quite go the way we planned. And the reason is, sales might be thinking, well, how I incentivize my sales representatives, I don't really see how that helps marketing. And unless you're part of the revenue operations department, that might not be as obvious. And you're sort of hoping that the sales manager or sales management kind of has the wherewithal to think maybe marketing might want to know this. But like I said, at first glance, it might not seem as obvious. The second thing that you're going to see here is that even though, yes, those customers closed, those customers are a lot more likely to churn on this purchase or churn as a customer because they've been sold a cable package that's probably not the best for their needs. So a ton of things could happen here that could be detrimental to the company. The first one being a competitor can easily swoop in and say, look, what you've ordered is overkill, or what you've been sold rather is overkill. I can sell you the correct internet plan at the right price, and you can leave internet company and come be a customer with us. And now that customer might feel, well, geez, I called in because of this marketing ad I saw, and then I got talked into a more expensive, internet plan. I got called in to cash out on this marketing promotion that I saw, and then I got talked into the more expensive internet plan. I kind of feel duped, and that might leave a bad taste in their mouth. They're more inclined to maybe leave a bad review for their company. So now you've not only lost a customer, but you have a customer preventing you from generating new sales. And even further down the line, let's say they do remain customers. Now you have customer service wasting a lot of time explaining to customers why they were sold the wrong plan. They're going to spend a lot of time maybe moving them to the right plan and getting them all set up. So there's a lot of time and money and unknowns floating around this whole situation that has generated a lot of revenue in the short term, but in the long term, it's just going to start eating away at the sales cycle, and it's not going to work out as good for the company. So now that I've talked about all this theory, let's boil things down a bit into why you should care about RevOps, or I should maybe even say these are sort of the highlights or the things that implement a robust revenue operations model. The first one is hiring and resourcing. So at some point, your business is going to grow and you're going to need to hire. That might be full-time or part-time, or maybe outsourcing to some type of firm or agency that can get the job done for you. You might need to add additional resources, to your toolkit, and that can all be exposed by revenue operations, right? For example, let's say you want to beef up your sales, so you hire a rock star salesperson, but you neglected to take a look at your marketing and see how many leads were coming in, how many opportunities that salesperson had to convert leads and to actually sell the product. So now you've hired a rockstar sales guy who's just sitting around waiting for leads to come in. Meanwhile, you're paying them top dollar and they're just, sitting around waiting, and their skills are just being wasted. And it's a big waste for the company as well. So by breaking down barriers between sales and marketing and customer service, you're less likely to overstaff one department and leave another department shorthanded. The next one, and these are in no particular order, by the way, is customer experience. So similar to the internet company example, we need to think about what that interaction looks like from the customer perspective. Sales and marketing and customer service might be saying, well, we do it this reason, or we do it this way for this reason, but they might not be thinking, well, what does that look like to the customer? Because they're not inside the company, they can't see what's happening. So I often think about a time, even with my cable or internet provider, when I might have called in for support and I was bounced around to a bunch of different departments, and I had to do things like give my account number several times. I had to explain the issue I was having several times. And by the time I was transferred the third time, I thought, why aren't you guys on a system where the information I told this guy gets over to you? I mean, you're probably sitting in the same office. Why isn't this happening? And that's because they don't have a robust revenue operations model in place. The next one is employee satisfaction. This is, of course, one that's near and dear to my heart. Breaking down silos enables your sales and marketing to communicate and work together more harmoniously. This is kind of my specialty, is getting sales and marketing to really fit together and really become a well-oiled machine. And that's the reason that I left my job at corporate. It was so big and had so many moving parts that weren't working together harmoniously that I became overwhelmed. And that the organization was 300-400 employees, just the sales and marketing organization. And it's, it felt like I was fighting an army there. So I was left the organization in search for a more streamlined operation, because I just wasn't satisfied at the company, because things were never working the way they were supposed to. The next one is scalability. We're all here because we want to grow, right? As bootstrappers, our end goal is to really grow this business on our own, and you want to be prepared for that growth. So scalability, RevOps is great at sort of uncovering your future needs and getting ahead of some of those gaps or necessities that you're going to have in your company. You don't want to put all of your time and attention, for example, into providing maybe a top-notch customer service when your sales and marketing functions are slowing down. You might leave your customer service representatives with no customers to service because you scaled too quickly. You thought customer service was going to be your competitive edge, but now you don't have the other right functions in place to really make those work cohesively. And then the last one is...
Can I ask a question on that, Sam?
Yeah.
On the scalability ones, like I'm like a big believer that you shouldn't bring in a head of sales before you hit $1 million in revenue, because like the founder should be the one that's at the forefront, like selling that. Do you think there's a certain point that it makes sense to bring in somebody in RevOps to help scale, and is it before that even?
Yeah, I'd say, I don't know if I'd put a number on it, but as you map out your RevOps model, which I'll talk about a bit later on in the presentation, it's going to expose parts of the business or parts of your process, rather, where you as the founder need to dedicate the most of your attention. So I think just by virtue of doing that, saying, okay, well, using your example, my forte is in sales, but things like marketing or managing my community or the social media aspect, I might need to bring on a hire, such as you've done. I might need to outsource that to a firm or an agency of some kind. So all that to say that I would answer that question by saying that when you've hit capacity as a founder, in other words, if you've used up all the hours in the day that you're willing to dedicate towards your business, that's when it's time to start pivoting and start looking at scaling options. Do I need to bring on another person that I need to train to sell as well as I do? Do I need to outsource this to, maybe a customer service firm or something like that? So I would keep that word in mind, is capacity. If that's 100 clients for you, depending on your business, that might be, if you're more of an enterprise sale business, it might be, 6 solid clients or something like that. But I'd say when you have exhausted all time you have to dedicate to the business and you need to start focusing on other parts in order to scale, that's when it's time to start delegating and really planning for the future. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Cool. So the last point here, just to wrap things up, is competition, right? Competition is always going to be one step ahead of you, and the ones that are the ones who have efficient RevOps. You're going to be constantly playing catch up with them. They're going to have better data, which I'm going to dig into a bit more because that's a really important facet of this, but they're going to be uncovering new trends and be jumping and acting on those new trends and making all the mistakes that you haven't made yet and discovering all the things that you haven't discovered yet. And they're always going to be one step ahead of you. So just by virtue of keeping up with your competition and staying competitive, revenue operations is a very key thing to implement to your organization. Last but not least, why you should really care about RevOps is because it saves you time and money and generates more revenue. So at the end of the day, it's going to save your business money, of course, which is crucial for bootstrappers. And the upfront cost of implementing RevOps is far less than the cost of not implementing RevOps. So that all sounds great and amazing, which begs the question, why aren't more companies doing this? It's because RevOps takes a considerable amount of time and planning and effort. It is setting up those sales and marketing and customer service functions, and then it's tying them all together. It's almost like the second step to doing that, or to scaling your business, right? So there's going to be a lot of discovery work, a lot of trial and error is going to be required, which can be very scary for a bootstrapper, especially one who's on a budget. And basically, RevOps, it is sort of the slow way of doing things at first, but it's because you're setting yourself up for a more efficient and more streamlined funnel later on down the line, and you'll be glad you did it. So in the long run, it does end up saving you a lot of money, which makes RevOps a good idea. So this has all been kind of theory and ideation so far. Let's talk about how we start implementing some of this stuff. Like a lot of functions in a business, they're sort of driven, I'll say, driven to grow through these 3 main components. So you might have seen these before, is that every sales organization, every marketing organization, every service organization, they're going to rely on their data, their technology, and their processes to grow, to grow the organization. So why is data more important? Having more data allows you to make more data-driven decisions. So think about things like some of my examples here. What data do you wish that you had about customers or leads? Let's say you get a bit further down the line after you're launching your business, you have your sales, marketing, customer service set up, and it comes time for running a promotion. Maybe marketing wants to send out a mailer to all of their active newsletter subscribers. But when you had everyone sign up for your newsletter, you didn't collect their mailing address. So that's one thing that's like, gosh, if I would have mapped out my whole revenue cycle and I had planned that promotion, I would have seen that I should be collecting this data at this point in my revenue cycle. And then I would have been more prepared to run, mailer promotions like this. So that's just one example. Other things to consider: what data does one department have that can benefit in another? Customers are in some way communicating with each of the 3 functions of RevOps, but that doesn't always make it back to the rest of the functions, right? So there might be a lot of chatter and a lot of good conversation going on between the customer and customer service representatives, and some of that data may be very useful to sales and marketing, but unless you have a robust model in place that enables a lot of cross department communication and collaboration, that valuable information might never reach the right people. And then, of course, it helps you decide about what data and analysis tools are right for your business. Speaking of which, technology is evolving all the time. It's always getting better. There's always new technologies and tech stacks and platforms coming out. They're going to help you do all types of things in your business. One of the biggest things to keep in mind when it comes to RevOps is automation. RevOps is all about making things more streamlined and efficient. So any type of tasks or processes that are administrative or don't add a lot of value to the customer experience, those are the type of things that you might want to automate or maybe outsource to a lesser skilled place like a staffing firm or a firm that maybe specializes in that type of work. And then, of course, what technology supports your competitive advantage? You might be a company that uses a lot of websites, a lot of digital touch points. You might use a sales portal instead of a salesperson. You might have a ton of different product lines and a ton of different customers across those product lines. And then next thing you know, you have gigabytes and gigabytes of data. In that case, maybe a data firm or hiring an in-house data analyst might be the answer for you. And then on the other hand, maybe you're a company that's known for running a particularly fast business. So you want to get the technology that's the fastest, or you're known as being a price leader in your industry. Maybe you want to focus on technology that's a bit more budget friendly. So these are all things to keep in mind as you start rolling out your strategy. And then the last one here is sort of a catch-all for anything not captured under data or technology is, of course, your processes. What new trends have emerged in your industry that require your team to pivot, what behaviors or habits need to be corrected, and what best practices need to be adapted. So these are all things kind of like the previous example for internet company. If the sales team is incentivized to sell the most expensive product because maybe they get the biggest commission, that's a habit that needs to be broken. I think starting with restructuring that incentivization plan or things like that. So that's what I mean when I talk about processes and how that kind of fits into RevOps. So now that we've gone through all the theory stuff, given you a few pillars to kind of guide your strategy building here, how should we actually get started as bootstrappers or solopreneurs, as I think a lot of us are? I recommend starting with these two things. So this is kind of two slides combined here. So I'm going to start on the left and say that the first thing I recommend everyone does is map out your entire revenue operations cycle from end to end, starting with that first touch point when customers first become aware of the product or service you provide. And then follow that customer journey all the way through to where they're actually consuming the product or service and giving feedback on that product or service, and maybe even being a repeat customer or staying on as a customer and not churning. What that's going to do is that's going to create a diagram that looks a bit like what you're looking at on the right there that I'm going to dive into in a bit more detail in just a sec. But I do want to first talk about that second point there, which is the second thing I recommend everyone does, which is start collecting data. I say do that early on because whether or not you realize it, your business, if you are in business and you are in operation and you are pursuing and serving customers, there's a ton of data circling around that you're going to have to pick and choose what you want to keep in your database, whether that's a program you're using or an Excel document or whatever. You're going to want to start collecting data early because you never know when you might need to go back into your database of customers and customer profiles you built and say, hey, these people never bought, but they did show interest at some point. So I don't want to let these guys fall through the cracks because they could be potential customers. I just haven't figured out the right way to sell to them yet. Meanwhile, let me keep this data in my database for future use and keep track of that entire interaction. So moving over to the left part of the screen, like I said, this is sort of the first step I recommend everyone takes. And this is just an example, right? Every business is going to look differently. I'm going to stick with that internet company example. Let's pretend that this is their sales funnel. They get internet consumers aware of the product, and then they hope that they, purchase the product and then stay on that monthly subscription. So when you map this out, the reason I like to do this is because it exposes a lot of things and sort of gets you in the mindset of thinking about what types of questions you need to ask yourself as you scale. So you have different phases here on the left. And by the way, if there was a bit more room on the slide, I would have yet another column that just had RevOps that would be tying sales, marketing, and customer service together, because that's really where all the operational stuff is happening at RevOps. At the RevOps level, whereas sales, marketing, customer service, they're just sort of serving their function, right? So back to the diagram here. As you look at these phases, some things you want to keep in mind are looking at things like how much time is it taking between these phases? Are customers hanging out in the decision phase for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, but then when they make a purchase, they're diving right into the product and they're showing lots of usage statistics and things like that, or they're giving feedback right away on how great the product is. And then it might beg the question, well, if they love the product so much, why did it take them so long to make a decision? And that's probably going to take a lot of communication between customer service and sales functions. Say, well, once they actually use the product, we're having a lot of success over here, really getting them to provide good feedback, to recommend it to other people, and to retain them as customers. They might be able to relay part of some of their best practices back to sales, because that could be leveraged in that phase of the customer journey to maybe expedite that a little bit and turn that 2 or 3 week lead time into more of maybe a 1 week conversion time or something like that. So is customer service producing a ton of repeat customers? This is another example I'm reading. This is a good example of this might be something that needs to be relayed back to marketing. If they're providing great customer service and they're getting a lot of good feedback that it's excellent, if that information makes it back to marketing, marketing can now use that as a selling point. Whereas if that communication never took place, marketing would still kind of be brainstorming on how do we pull this audience in? How do we entice them enough to call sales and things like that? Other things you want to think about: what type of feedback is appropriate to collect at each one of these phases? I keep talking about data ad nauseum here, but at the same time, you don't want to be surveying your customers on every single call, asking them questions every single call right before a promotion where you're going to send out a mailer. You don't want to quick give them a call and say, can I get your address so I can send you this piece of promotion, right? So you need to be very deliberate about when you're collecting feedback on your customer, either by their website behavior or something like that, or when you get actual direct feedback, like asking them for questions and questions and concerns about your product or anything like that. And then figure out, maybe if you're asking them at the beginning of the cycle, you're not getting as many results. Customers maybe aren't taking the survey as much, but then when you get maybe towards the bottom, they might be a bit more, and they've experienced the product, maybe they are a bit more willing to provide some feedback just because they've had a great experience and they're in a better mood. And then you're able to get sort of more fruitful and actionable data that way. A couple other quick examples here. Which messaging is most effective at which stage? That can be easily done through A/B testing. Do we say this piece of messaging at the decision phase, or do we say it at the purchase phase? What has a bigger impact on the customer? And then the last thing I want to point out is you also want to look at where are customers churning, or where are they falling off of this cycle? Are they becoming aware of the product and then getting interested, but then when it comes time to make a decision, they're falling off? Are they purchasing the product and then becoming a customer, and then once they're experiencing the product, then are they falling off? So it's really going to expose where the gaps are in the cycle, and it's going to, again, bring together those 3 functions to try and solve what could happen, because marketing could have the answer for something that's happening, for something negative that's happening down in the customer service department. Cool. So would recommend with starting with those items. And the next thing I want to jump into here are some of my favorite tools and resources for streamlining RevOps. So I'm guessing most of you have heard of most of these tools, but I chose these because they're built for rapid growth, first of all, which is what we're all here for. and they've built for scale. I didn't want to, I know there's a few data analytics tools and a few customer relationship management tools out there that are sort of built for maybe small business or solopreneurs. But as your business scales, and particularly if you don't know how big your business is going to get, you do run the risk of outgrowing those programs. And I can tell you, switching from one customer relationship management software to another, for example, going from HubSpot to Salesforce, for example, is an absolute nightmare. It's going to cost you a ton of time, a ton of money. You may need to hire some outside consultants to help you do it. So choosing the right one early on is a pretty big deal. So I'll jump into the list here. The first one I wanted to start with are freelance sites, and there's a method to this. So freelance sites, I think are things that people forget about most often, and maybe don't realize quite how many services are available on websites like Fiverr and Upwork, and how really cheap they are. I mean, you have access to this huge pool of talent who are doing a lot of times the same task day in and day out, every hour of every day, and they're just masters at this stuff. So, you could spend all day, maybe weeks, figuring out some of these tools that I've listed below, but a lot of times you can just call up or put an ad out for a freelancer on Fiverr who does this every day, and they're able to, for a one-time fee, get you set up in Google Analytics or get you set up in HubSpot in 1 or 2 days and have all the reports that you need and everything like that. And then you can just kind of use the program as they've set it up. So don't feel like you have to do everything on your own. Always keep these freelance sites in the back of your site to think, okay, I need to spend a couple of days doing this, or I could pay $50 to this gentleman in Bangladesh to just, figure out what the best keywords are for my website or something like that. And he could probably bang it out a lot quicker than you can if he's used to doing that type of work. I highlighted Fiverr there because that's my personal favorite. I think they have the widest breadth of services offered. But just keep in mind that I think they're more suited for sort of short-term or one-off type tasks. Whereas if you're looking for more of a long-term engagement or maybe some contract work, I would highly recommend Upwork. I think in terms of integrity, they're both very good websites and can sometimes even be used interchangeably. So with that in mind, for digital analytics, this might seem basic, but I had to plug Google Analytics. It really is, in my opinion, the best analytics tool out there, at least the best analytics tool to start with for a few reasons. First of all, it's free to use and it's free to learn. So you have Google providing a whole flurry of informational courses, video content, tutorials. They have live webinars just like this one where you can learn all the new developments about Google Analytics and things like that. And there is a ton of support available for it. Similarly, there are a ton of people and websites like Fiverr and Upwork and a ton of subject matter experts and gurus on YouTube that can teach you how to do things. Because it's such a widely used program, there is such a huge community of people who are working together to try and make it successful for other businesses. So I highly recommend getting Google Analytics set up as early as possible. And this can be done just by planting tags on the different pages of your website if you are a very website forward organization. And it can track your other assets as well, like your mobile apps and things like that, or some of your smart checkout systems like Square and things like that. And it's very dynamic in terms of what type of reports and things you can produce. So again, if you can get a guy, if you're willing to put in the time to go through the academy, or if you can get a guy to set that up for you, it's as easy as opening up Google Analytics and all of your KPIs are right there, right in front of you. Let me see if I had, and the other thing, of course, is that it's easily integratable with other tech stacks. So let's say you do decide to adopt another tech stack or piece of software into your tech stack moving on. Something like Google Analytics is integratable with like all the major pieces of software so they can speak to each other and you're not leaving any departments out of the loop. The next vital thing you're going to need as you get more and more customers even if you're selling into more of an enterprise type model where you might only have between 5 and 10 customers, HubSpot is just a great tool for keeping track of all of your customers, all of your customer data. And for example, each customer has a profile, so you can log into HubSpot, you can see that customer's profile, look at all their data, decide how to segment them. Once you get a large number of customers, you can actually start using some of HubSpot's data tools. You can integrate Google Analytics with it and use some of their computing power to analyze your customer base as well. But yeah, the more you have, the better data you're going to get, and the earlier you start, the more data you're going to have. So again, that person who showed interest, maybe filled out a contact form or something several years ago, if you keep track of that person early on, even if you don't know how you're going to target them yet, you still have their data, you still have their customer profile, you still know how they showed interest. And maybe one day it's going to click for you, or you're going to hire a marketer and he's going to say, I know how to get all of these dormant contacts talking to us again. Good thing we had started recording data a long time ago, because now I know who this customer base is, and I can decide how I'm going to approach them. The other good thing about HubSpot is that you can easily assign tasks for yourself and your team. And a lot of that can be done automatically, which is why moving into workflow automation, I also put HubSpot at the top of the list there. But before I get into that, workflow automation, I don't want you to think that if you don't have a team, you don't need workflow automation, because I think that what it's great at doing is helping you understand how much time you need to allocate to certain tasks, which is why I mentioned Monday on there. But HubSpot can do everything that Monday can do. It just requires a lot more manual setting up. For example, let's say using that newsletter example that I was using earlier, you can set things up like, let's say the marketing team sends out a newsletter and a particular lead opens that newsletter and all subsequent newsletter. They're clicking on all the links, they're engaging really highly, but they haven't reached out to the company for some reason. In HubSpot, it not only can tell that the customer has read that email and clicked on all the links, it can automatically read that as a trigger to assign a task to your sales function to say, hey, this person's showing a lot of interest in the company, particularly the newsletter. Maybe it's worth giving them a call and seeing what they're interested in. And that can all be automated. And then the salesperson, whether that's you or a salesperson you've hired, they can click into that contact's name and they can see a history of what they've done. They were sent the newsletter on this date, they opened it on this date, they clicked all the links on this date. And so that sort of gives the salesperson the idea that, okay, I understand why I'm calling this person. I'm probably not going to tell them that I've been spying on their open rates and which links they've been clicking and things like that, but I at least understand how I'm going into this conversation. And then I gave Monday an honorable mention here. It's not my favorite, but if you are just starting out and HubSpot seems a little daunting, Monday is sort of a parsed down workflow automation software. So it is a bit cleaner to look at and it's a bit more user friendly. And as you scale, if you are sold on Monday and you really like it, it can integrate with HubSpot, which is great about a lot of these tools. Even though they're separate, they can sort of be linked and work together, so they are all talking to each other. But again, HubSpot is kind of the MVP in my opinion. It can be leveraged for marketing. It can be leveraged for sales. And then when the customer reaches the customer service level of their engagement, they can jump into HubSpot and see why did we sell this person? What was marketing telling them? What was sales telling them? What do I need to talk to them about so that I'm consistent with what they've been told so far, so that they have a consistent customer journey, which is enabled, of course, by the software we're using.
If I could add, just agree with you. We use HubSpot for like everything with Thrive, and like I found it to be very simple, very useful. The engagement thing you mentioned about like email opens has been pretty big. If we send an email to 3,000 people and like 75 of them open it 3 out of 5 days a week. Like those are the 75 people I'm going to call and try to get interested. You know, they're not unsubscribing, like they're opening or engaging in the content in some way. So those are the people that, if I say it's Eric Harrison from Thrive, I at least feel the highest likelihood they'll give me the 5 seconds to try to move that conversation forward. So just to say, it's been really helpful for us and very cost effective, obviously.
Right, absolutely. I mean, again, you only have so many hours in the day. You need to be calling, starting at least with the leads who are going to be most valuable and who are most likely to turn into customers. And so that can save you a lot of time and help you decide how you want to approach those customers. You know, maybe for the less engaged ones, maybe just keeping them on the newsletter list for a little longer and tracking their engagement for a little while is the best move. So since we have a couple minutes left, I'll jump into my last slide and I'll tell the story as quickly as possible. I mentioned before I had to make up a case study, but I wanted to also talk about a real case study that's one of my favorites, and it's a quick one to go through that I think is really fun about just RevOps in actions and RevOps working really well. So back in 2002, Target hired, and this is a true story. Target hired a gentleman named Andrew Pohl as a statistician to sort of bolster their data department within their marketing function. And they sort of tasked him with, we want to be known as a place that families can go, whether they need housewares, cleaning products, whatever. Also, if they're expecting parents or if the household expecting a new infant. And so Andrew Pohl, he dove right into the data, being a statistician, being a data junkie, and he started looking at buying habits of all their different customers. He was able to do that because Target has things like online purchasing. They have that Target Red card that links all of your purchases to a specific person. So he's gathering the data on all these different profiles, and he's noticing that, okay, I can see who the new parents are. They're buying a lot of things, blankets, diapers, formula, things like that. But beforehand, there's a few not so obvious things that they're buying. So I'm noticing that from this data set of expecting parents, maybe 2 or 3 months prior, they're buying prenatal vitamins, or maybe 2 or 3 months prior, they're buying baby books or something like that. Those are a bit more obvious ones that I'm sure the data uncovered some more interesting ones. But so that was all sales data, right? So that was all looking at what these customers have purchased. And he compiled that data and he shared it with their marketing department. So this is, again, talking about cross-function communication. He was taking the data that existed in sales, had no reason to leave sales except to improve sales. And he went over to marketing and said, look, 2 or 3 months before expecting parents actually welcome the infant into their household, they're buying this list of items. So what Target did is said, okay, we're going to look at customers who are buying that initial list of items, and then we're going to start promoting all the products that follow, the diapers, the blankets, the baby formula, and things like that, and try and get ahead of the competition. So maybe we'll run that promotion a month before they're expecting. So basically, by looking at sales data, Andrew Pohl was able to figure out when his customers were going to be delivering a child. Which is really interesting. And then the urban legend that was, I think, later proved true later on that happened was that a angry father in Minnesota stormed into a Target one day and demanded to know why Target was sending his 16-year-old daughter all these coupons for these baby products. He thought his daughter was, a sweet little girl and not misbehaving. And then sure enough, later on, he had to apologize and say, okay, I eat my words. Sure enough, she was pregnant, and there was no glitch in your system. We did in fact have a need for those products. And just to put a cap on that conversation, likely when he did storm into the Target store, it was probably customer service who he had to speak to with that complaint. Again, if they have the right systems in place, customer service can also log into whatever customer relationship management software they're using and see, okay, I see why they were sent those materials is because of their buying habits. Maybe I don't need to divulge that to the customer, but it will set me up to have a more pleasant conversation and improve the customer experience. So just wanted to end with that story. That's one of my favorite ones that's also true. And Andrew Pohl, of course, is a big guru in the data analytics community and does talks and stuff like that all over the place. But yeah, so that is my presentation on RevOps. Wanted to thank everyone for attending, and I know I used up all of my time and went a minute over, but I have a few minutes to hang on the line if anyone wants to ask any questions or contribute any discussion or anything like that. But once again, thank you for joining, and yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for doing this, Sam. We really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll have you back on here again soon. And Tyler, Holly, Michael, Liz, everybody else that joined, thanks so much for making the time. I will post as well as Sam's contact information, email, and LinkedIn in the community. I'm sure he's probably open to, I won't speak for him, but if you want to reach out to Sam, I'm sure he's cool with it.
Please do. Yeah, LinkedIn is the best for business related stuff. I'm usually in that mindset when I'm on there. So shoot me a LinkedIn message, shoot me a connection. Let's follow one another.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, everybody, and we'll chat soon. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.